Okay, so you know how we're always digging into the latest news and trying to make sense of everything that's going on in the world? Well, today we're going to take a break from all of that and dive into something a little bit different, something a little bit more, well, personal, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a bit more inward focused.
Exactly. We're going to be talking about self-care through mindful eating.
We've been looking into some really interesting research and perspectives on this.
Hmm.
And it's all about moving away from the whole diet culture thing, that whole restrictive mindset around food, and really tapping into a more intuitive and enjoyable way of relating to what we eat.
So mindful eating, I mean, I've heard the term before, but to be honest, it sounds kind of, a little bit out there. Like, am I supposed to be meditating over a single raisin or something?
Hmm.
Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown? What exactly is mindful eating?
Right, so it's not quite that esoteric.
Mm.
I think the easiest way to understand it is to think about it as bringing that same kind of awareness that you might experience during meditation to your meals. It's about, instead of just eating on autopilot, which, let's be honest, so many of us do, it's about really slowing down and paying attention to what we're actually experiencing. So it's about listening to your body's cues about hunger and fullness. It's about really savoring each bite, noticing the flavors, the textures. And it's also about, recognizing that meal times can be these little opportunities for self-care throughout the day. It's not just about, shoveling food in as quickly as possible to fuel up.
So it's kind of the opposite of those, crash diets where you're denying yourself everything you enjoy and just constantly battling cravings.
Absolutely. That's a really important distinction. Mindful eating isn't about deprivation.
Mm.
It's not about focusing on what you can't have. It's actually about fully experiencing and appreciating what you do have. And what's really interesting is that this shift in perspective often leads to a much greater sense of satisfaction with your meals and with your overall relationship with food.
Well, that definitely sounds like a positive change. But, for someone like me who's always on the go, why should I actually make this effort to be more mindful when I eat? Like, what are the tangible benefits?
The benefits can be surprisingly profound. So for starters, by practicing mindful eating, you start to become much more attuned to your body's natural hunger signals. You start to be able to differentiate between, actual physical hunger and those times when you might be eating out of boredom or stress or emotions. You also start to appreciate the sensory experience of food in a whole new way. Like, you really start to notice the nuances of taste and texture and aroma. And this heightened awareness often naturally guides you towards making food choices that actually support your overall well-being. And what's really fascinating is that many people find that they experience a significant reduction in stress and anxiety around food and meal times in general. It kind of takes away that sense of guilt and pressure and really transforms eating into a much more pleasurable and nourishing experience.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. So let's say someone wants to give this whole mindful eating thing a try. Where do they even begin? Like, what are some practical first steps they can take?
Well, the research we've looked at actually offers some really great starting points. And one of the simplest but most powerful things you can do is to actually create a peaceful environment for your meals. So that means you'll find a quiet spot away from distractions like your phone, your computer, the TV. And it also means, even if you're just eating by yourself, taking a moment to maybe set the table, use real plates and cutlery. These little rituals can really help to signal to your mind and body that this is a dedicated time for nourishment, a time to slow down and be present with your food.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Like, I've definitely noticed the difference between, when I scarf down lunch at my desk while I'm working and when I actually take the time to, sit down at the table and just focus on eating.
Exactly. And another really important practice is to really engage all of your senses before you even take a bite. So take a moment to really look at your food. Notice the colors, the shapes, the textures. Inhale the aromas. And maybe even think for a moment about where your food came from, all the steps that it took to get to your plate. This simple act of appreciation can really help to bring you into the present moment and enhance your entire experience.
It's amazing how we often just completely rush through that whole part of eating. It's like, we just want to get to the fuel as quickly as possible. So, okay, we've set the scene, we've appreciated our food. Now, what are some specific techniques we can use while we're actually eating to be more mindful?
There are several really helpful techniques you can try. One is to simply take 3 deep breaths before you begin eating. This helps to kind of calm your nervous system and signals to your body that it's time to relax and digest.
Okay, deep breaths before digging in. I can do that.
Another one is to put your utensils down between each bite.
Oh, see, now that one sounds a little bit awkward.
It might feel a little strange at first, but it really forces you to slow down and gives your body time to register those feelings of fullness.
Okay, so just little pauses between bites. Got it.
And then as you're chewing, really try to pay attention to the flavors and textures. Explore the different nuances. What notes can you detect? Is it sweet, salty, sour, crunchy, creamy? Really engaging your senses in this way can make even simple foods so much more satisfying.
So it's like turning eating into this kind of, you know, sensory exploration.
Exactly. And then throughout the meal, make a point of checking in with your hunger levels. Ask yourself, am I still truly hungry for this next bite? Or am I starting to feel comfortably satisfied?
Mm.
These little check-ins can really help you to avoid overeating and to really tune into your body's wisdom.
So these are all great tips for, when everything's going smoothly and you have time to really focus on your meal. But what about those times when you're, rushing to get out the door or you're at a social gathering and you just kind of fall back into those old habits of mindless eating? How do we navigate those more challenging situations?
That's a great question, and it's something that comes up a lot. And I think the most important thing to remember is that you don't have to be perfectly mindful at every single meal. It's not an all or nothing thing.
Okay, phew, that's good to hear.
Even just incorporating small, mindful moments throughout your day can make a difference. Like taking a moment to really savor your morning coffee or paying attention to a few bites of your lunch. Anytime you can bring even a little bit of awareness to your eating, it's a win. And if you find yourself, eating on autopilot at some point, don't beat yourself up about it. Just gently try to bring a little more attention to your next meal or snack. It's all about progress, not perfection.
So it's about those little moments of intention throughout the day. I like that. So now let's talk about the bigger picture. What are some of the, wider benefits of mindful eating? Does it go beyond just our experience with food in the moment? Wow.
Absolutely. The research suggests that mindful eating can actually have some pretty amazing ripple effects throughout our lives. For example, many people find that they experience better digestion because they're slowing down and chewing their food more thoroughly. And they also report feeling less bloated and uncomfortable after meals. There's also evidence to suggest that mindful eating can lead to improvements in mood and a reduction in anxiety, particularly anxiety that's related to food and body image. And some people even find that they have more sustained energy throughout the day because their bodies are better able to absorb and utilize the nutrients from their food when they're eating more mindfully. And then, of course, there's the whole, deeper level of appreciation for food and where it comes from and how it nourishes us. It can really shift your whole perspective on eating and your relationship with food.
So it's not just about what we're eating, but how we're eating and the whole experience surrounding it. Now, of course, everyone's different. So is there a one-size-fits-all approach to mindful eating? Or how do we kind of personalize this practice to fit our own individual lives and needs?
That's such an important point. There's really no right or wrong way to practice mindful eating. The key is to find what works for you and what feels sustainable in the long term. So the research suggests, starting small. Maybe you focus on just one meal a day to begin with. Or maybe you start by paying more attention to your snacks. And then as you become more comfortable, you can gradually incorporate more mindful practices into your routine. It's really about finding what clicks for you and making it your own.
So it's like a journey of exploration and experimentation.
Exactly. And like any journey, there will be ups and downs. There will be days when you feel really connected to the practice and days when you forget all about it. And that's okay. The most important thing is to just keep coming back to it with a sense of curiosity and kindness towards yourself.
So no judgment, just gentle awareness.
Exactly.
Now, something else that really struck me about the research we've been looking at is this concept of mindful wellness, which seems to kind of naturally flow from mindful eating. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how does mindful eating kind of connect to this broader idea of well-being?
Yeah, it's really interesting as we become more attuned to our eating habits and what our bodies are telling us. It often leads us to consider other areas of our lives where we might want to bring more mindfulness and intention. And the research actually highlights several interconnected aspects of mindful wellness.
Oh, this is fascinating. Tell me more.
Okay, so for example, it talks about the importance of incorporating things like herbal teas and other nourishing beverages into our daily routines. It even talks about how certain types of dark chocolate can actually be a part of a mindful relaxation practice when enjoyed with intention.
Hey, hold on. You're telling me chocolate can be mindful. I'm listening.
Right. It also emphasizes the importance of staying hydrated and how something as simple as mindfully sipping infused water throughout the day can benefit our skin and our energy levels. And then when we look at meal planning, it encourages us to think beyond just the individual meals and to start planning our meals in a way that supports our overall well-being. So that might mean incorporating more plant-based meals or making sure we're getting enough protein for recovery after exercise. Or maybe it's about including foods that are known for their relaxing properties like chamomile or lavender. And it even offers practical tips for meal prep and making quick and healthy snacks and smoothies.
So it's like taking that mindful awareness and applying it to the whole process of how we nourish ourselves, from planning our meals to choosing our snacks to staying hydrated.
Exactly. And then there's this whole other dimension of mindful wellness that focuses on the mind-body connection. So it explores things like the synergy between yoga and nutrition and the benefits of incorporating healing ingredients like anti-inflammatory spices and traditional herbal remedies into our diets. And it even gets into the mindful timing of our meals, like being aware of which foods might be best to avoid before certain activities or establishing more regular eating patterns throughout the day.
It's fascinating to think that even the timing of our meals can be a form of self-care.
You really can. And then finally, there's this idea of sustainable wellness practices. So it's about finding ways to support ourselves over the long term, whether that's through, making sure we're getting the right nutrients for recovery after exercise, or finding ways to incorporate mindful eating into our busy lives in a way that feels manageable and sustainable. And it really emphasizes that this is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about finding what works for you and making gradual changes over time. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to make sure we address some of the most common questions that people have about mindful eating, because I'm sure our listeners are thinking the same things I am. So, first off, what about those times when you only have like 15 minutes for lunch? Is it even possible to be mindful when you're that rushed?
It definitely can feel challenging when you're short on time. But the research actually suggests that even a few minutes of mindful eating can make a difference. It's not about the length of the meal, it's about the quality of your attention during that time. So even if you only have a few minutes, you can still take a few deep breaths before you start eating. You can put your phone away, and you can really try to focus on the taste and texture of your food. And what's interesting is that some people actually find that they feel more satisfied with their meals, even if they're shorter, because they were truly present for each bite.
Okay, so it's about making the most of those little pockets of time. What about social gatherings? Like sometimes it feels like you need to eat at a certain pace to keep up with the conversation. How can you be mindful without seeming like you're not engaged with the people around you?
Right? That's a really common concern. And I think the key is to find a balance between being present in the social interaction and also bringing some awareness to your eating. So, you can still participate in the conversation and enjoy the company of others while also taking a few mindful pauses between bites. Maybe setting your utensils down while you're talking or listening. And just trying to stay tuned in to your hunger and fullness cues, even amidst the social buzz.
So it's not about, withdrawing from the social situation. It's about finding a way to integrate mindfulness into it. Now, another question that comes up a lot is about weight loss. Does practicing mindful eating directly lead to weight loss?
So while mindful eating is not specifically a weight loss technique, many people do find that it helps them to reach and maintain a healthy weight. And that's because by becoming more aware of your hunger and fullness cues, you're less likely to overeat. And you're also more likely to make food choices that truly nourish your body. But the primary focus of mindful eating is really about developing a healthier and more positive relationship with food. And any changes in weight are often a natural byproduct of that.
So it's not about, restricting yourself or following a specific diet. It's about tuning into your body's wisdom and making choices that feel good for you. Okay, last question, I promise. What about stress eating? When you just kind of reach for food as a way to cope with difficult emotions. How can mindfulness help with that?
Mindfulness can be incredibly helpful for managing stress eating because it helps you to create a space between the urge to eat and the act of eating. So when you feel that urge to reach for food in response to stress or emotions, the practice encourages you to pause, take a few deep breaths, and ask yourself, am I truly physically hungry right now, or am I just trying to numb out with food?
And that little pause, that little moment of awareness can be so powerful because sometimes it's enough to help you recognize the emotional trigger and choose a different way to cope. Maybe you go for a walk or call a friend or do something else that helps you to process those emotions in a healthier way. And if you do decide to eat, doing so mindfully can help you to actually savor the food and the experience without that added layer of guilt or shame.
So it's about creating that little pause button and making a conscious choice.
Exactly.
I think we've covered just about everything. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they embark on their mindful eating journeys? I think the most important thing is to remember that mindful eating is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about cultivating a more kind and compassionate relationship with yourself and with food. And it's about finding what works for you and making gradual changes over time. So be patient with yourself. Celebrate your successes. And remember that every mindful bite you take is a step in the right direction.
It's a journey of self-discovery, and it can be so incredibly rewarding. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into self-care through mindful eating, I want to leave you with one final thought. As you go about your day to day, consider how you might incorporate just one mindful practice into your next meal. Maybe it's taking a few deep breaths before you begin, or putting your fork down between bites, or simply noticing the flavors and textures of your food with a little more attention. And just see how that one small shift can change your entire experience. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.